Thanks for coming to my video on 3 fake characters and their real life counterparts, where I will be explaining 3 fake characters in depth and comparing them against their real world heroes to see how much they differ. The first character we have is Gilgamesh. In the anime, he was known as the first hero and the king of heroes, making him one of the most powerful heroic spirits. He was also an archer and excelled at longer range combat. He could also be summoned as a caster, although it was a weaker version. Interestingly, his caster class summon reflected his demeanor towards the end of life, where he became more empathetic and gave away a large portion of his treasure hoard to save his city Uruk, being left with just a few magic staffs. He was also very close to Enkidu and became good friends with Enkidu when Enkidu was sent to stop him and they fought to a draw. He also had a weapon called Enkidu or the Chains of Heaven, which could bind anyone and gained more strength the higher the target's divinity level. Gilgamesh possesses several noble phantasms, which are special abilities or objects held by heroic spirits meant to present key events or feats they had in their lives. In Gilgamesh's case, his main noble phantasm was the Gate of Babylon. He essentially had access to a near limitless treasure hoard, which even contained the noble phantasms of other heroes. His noble phantasm allowed him to summon multiple portals which could launch weapons from his hoard at high speeds to inflict damage. The most powerful weapon within this hoard was none other than Ea, the Sword of Rupture. It could shoot a powerful beam of energy that could destroy almost anything without equal, overpowering Excalibur and even killing Tiamat. In real life, however, Gilgamesh was simply the king of Uruk, one of the earliest urban cities and the largest urban settlement during its time. He reigned in ancient history around 2800 BC. One of his real-life feats included building or at least restoring the Great Walls of Uruk and ruling the city for a good amount of time. However, most of the other feats did not happen. Instead, due to his fame as a ruler, a large amount of fan fiction, otherwise known as myths, was written about him, and one of these mythical stories became known as the famed Epic of Gilgamesh. Now, the Epic of Gilgamesh was not some other bedtime story, it was the first and original hero story in human history. This effectively lends some credibility to calling Gilgamesh as humanity's first hero. However, it must be noted that most of the deeds in here were written by overzealous fanboys and likely untrue. Some of his greater deeds in this epic included slaying Humbaba. Humbaba was a monster chosen by the god Enlil himself and a divine beast which protected the cedar forest. As such, slaying this beast was no easy feat, and Gilgamesh needed the help of his friend Enkidu to finish it, strengthening the bond between them. Other notable feats included slaying the Bull of Heaven, which is also described in the Fate universe as a divine beast sent by the gods themselves. He was also a remarkable king and upheld the city of Uruk. Now, when we compare Fate and the Epic, there are some differences. While Gilgamesh in Fate had a near limitless treasure hoard, in real life his treasures were unremarkable. While he was a rich king, he was not famous for being the richest. Nonetheless, in both stories, Gilgamesh began as an arrogant king in both, who eventually grew wiser and kinder with the years and facing adversity, and eventually became remembered as a good king. Both stories also had him referred to as partly divine. However, he never actually fought ranged combat much in the Epic of Gilgamesh, preferring melee combat instead of archery. The next character we will analyze is Artoria Pendragon. In Fate, she was known as the Queen of Britain but portrayed as an emotionally detached ruler in Fate Grand Order. She was mostly a saber and her closest associates included Lancelot, who was her greatest knight. Her noble phantasms included Excalibur, which was a legendary sword. Its most notable ability was to summon a powerful beam of light that could deal large amounts of damage in an area. She also had the scabbard of Excalibur called Avalon as a noble phantasm. You see, Avalon granted the ability to heal almost any mortal wound, while also granting her the ability to phase to Avalon and avoid most attacks, even an attack from Ea. In real life, however, she was known as the Great King Arthur. King Arthur was debatably a real person who was a Romano-British commander around the 500 AD period. However, his name became wrapped in myth as King Arthur, the legendary King of Britain. His most notable myths include commanding the greatest order of knights, known as the Round Table, while also wielding the legendary sword Excalibur. It is important to note that the legend of King Arthur was mostly myth. His most notable feat was defending Britain and defeating the greatest threat to the country, the Saxons, cementing his fame as a king and battle commander. He was also known for defeating Mordred, a member of the Knight of the Round Table who committed treason and tried to usurp the throne. Unfortunately, Arthur did suffer fatal wounds during the conflict, and that was the end of his story. It is said that Arthur currently rests in Avalon and will return one day when Britain is threatened. Some notable knights of the Round Table include Lancelot, who was the best fighter among them. Galahad was regarded as the best knight and the only one who managed to achieve the Holy Grail and ascend directly to heaven as a result of his honor and purity. Lastly, the knight Mordred became famed as the traitor who managed to end King Arthur's rule. Now, when we compare them, the biggest difference is of course in the Arthurian legends. King Arthur was 100% a guy. Both characters also wielded Excalibur. Both were also considered relatively ideal kings. However, in the books, Arthur did have flaws such as overlooking Lancelot's infidelity and also failed to achieve the Holy Grail, unlike Galahad. In the show, Artoria was distant and cold, which caused some resentment among the lower members of society. Lastly, in actual law, Excalibur was largely a symbolic sword to grant legitimacy to Arthur claiming the throne. Beyond its sharpness and occasional glows of light, it did not lend as much physical strength as claimed in the show, so no gigantic beams of light obliterating entire armies. Lastly, we have our favorite fanboy Astolfo. In Fate, Astolfo was the son of an English king and part of the 12 paladins of Charlemagne. He was a rider class and often fought with his lance. His notable associates were of course Charlemagne, who was his king, and Roland, who was his cousin in Fate. Astolfo's noble phantasms include a hippogriff, which was a hybrid animal between a griffin and a horse. The hippogriff could be summoned anytime and was a fierce creature with strong attacks. It could also phase briefly to avoid attacks. Astolfo's other noble phantasm was a book called Cassio di Logistile, which could protect against strong magic attacks. Astolfo also had a lance and a horn, as his other noble phantasms. Now in real life, however, Astolfo was entirely myth and not based on any real person. He was a major character in the matter of France, another piece of historical myths. Astolfo was a duke and the son of King Otto, the King of England. Astolfo was first introduced in Matter of France as being stuck in the form of a myrtle tree by an evil sorceress, but was eventually rescued. He served Charlemagne as a loyal paladin throughout the Matter of France. The Matter of France was one of three matters, the other two being of Rome and Britain. The Matter of France largely detailed the myths surrounding Charlemagne and his paladins. Some of Astolfo's most notable feats in the matter included going to the moon on a hippogriff to retrieve Roland's lost wits. Astolfo was also able to defeat a giant multiple times of his size by scaring him off with his horn. Furthermore, he defeated a regenerating thief that could not be killed by cutting off the thief's hair, which gave the thief immortality and defeated the thief. When we compare both Fate and the Matter of France, Astolfo had a hippogriff in both. However, in Matter, the hippogriff was loaned and not actually his. Also in Matter of France, while Astolfo was frequently described as being charming and having good looks, there was little indication pointing to him being feminine presenting. However, it is interesting to note that all four of Astolfo's noble phantasms, the hippogriff, book, lance, and horn, did exist in the matter and were objects of special magical powers. Also, throughout both stories, Astolfo was largely regarded as an honorable paladin with little controversy. And that is it for my presentation on 3 Fate characters and their real-life counterparts. Do consider leaving a like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video and want to see more content like this. Thanks for watching and goodbye.